I'm going to talk about something extemporaneously here, improvisationally, that I was exposed to a long time ago. So hopefully I won't wander too much, but if I just wander a little, I'm going to post anyway. The topic is that freedom really is in your mind. That there's really multiple terms of freedom, and that if you're restrained in the real world, that's different. That freedom itself is separate from your oppression or somebody performing, some act that is a crime against you. And the idea there has been, as I've said, is if you have a slave, if you're a slave and you accept that your master owns you, which there's examples in antiquity, and I think we might find other examples of slaves that basically believe in the property rights as they were defined, such that they became slaves. So in the olden days, maybe your family sold you into slavery, or you were a part of a conquered people, and you accepted that this meant you had to be a slave. Compare that with somebody who knows that they should be free and that is also, a slave, but realizes that they're being oppressed and that a crime is being perpetrated against them. Whether or not they can accomplish, securing their freedom, maybe they could teach their kids that they're free, even though they haven't secured their freedom, and so their kids will fight for their freedom. Okay, so the idea is called NSPIC, and it's something I was exposed to about 20 years ago by one of these sort of crazy, no offense to you guys, libertarian types that, argues you don't need to pay taxes, and he would not pay his taxes. And I believe his name was Frederick Clarkson. I'd have to go look for that. Maybe I'll look for that before I post. And I don't know if he's still around, but he had a mailing list, which I was banned from actually for interpreting NSPIC my own way and trying to tell him what it really meant. But anyway, his theory of NSPIC, it's an acronym for Neuro Semantic Political Illusion Complex. And his point was, for example, let's say he would disobey some local government mandate or not pay taxes or not get a permit for something or any, this was sort of his hobby to protest in that kind of way. His point is that people think that they're going against the government as one big thing. And his point was that what you really need to do when you fight the government is pay attention to who, as an individual in the government hierarchy, you're really working against. So if you don't get a local permit, you're not fighting the government, you're fighting some local bureaucrat or elected official that has control of that local permit process. And these are the people that have the discretion to give you a break or to not enforce the violation. And so this was part of his advice, is practical advice, is that you keep that in mind. But his point beyond that was that why do we think of there being this monolithic thing as the government? His point was that there was really this public infrastructure of powers, and that every bureaucrat has, a certain number of, a fleet of cars, maybe tanks, maybe guns, personnel, finite real world resources that are not the whole government, and they're not some idea of having a right to, actually govern anybody. So the neurosemantic political illusion complex is the illusion complex by which we just imagine there being this thing that is the government. And I found this really something of a revelation to think this way. And it's one reason that I don't support the market anarchy approach, because I don't think there is just a single government. I think that there is an infrastructure with certain people controlling it. Sometimes that control is corrupt. Sometimes that control is just ill-designed. I mean, example of infrastructure that's ill-designed and as a result corrupt. In the elections in 2000, or any election, but we really saw it in 2000, to have a political appointee who is the final arbiter of what votes are sent from a state, that should be somebody dedicated to being nonpartisan. Now, people aren't always nonpartisan, but it is possible to create institutions with people that you hold to a nonpartisan ideals, and you can at least reduce the conflict of interest that way. And so that's a bad design. But a governor that has the discretion to move that state's police, that's probably not a bad design. If somebody's abusing that and say making the state police do something corrupt, that's just a corrupt person using the discretion inappropriately. So the neurosemantic political illusion complex is this idea by which we don't make those sorts of distinctions, and we think of the government sort of all at once. And see, we're offended by this idea. But the idea itself is an illusion. We really have public infrastructure with certain people that have a discretion over that public infrastructure. So for freedom to be in the mind, is a matter of freeing ourselves from these illusions. Now, when you free yourself from that illusion, all you freed yourself is from an illusion about who is doing what to you. The reality is still that whatever you blamed on the government, somebody is causing that. That's still going on. But you have seen more reality, and I think this is the same idea with freedom being the first step of freedom being freedom in your own mind, and then moving on. The first step is to realize the nature of your oppression. The second step is then to go do something about it. And so anyway, it's an interesting idea, and I didn't like the rest of his ideas, but I did learn a lot about sort of the no taxes, libertarian, let's build a boat and make a sovereign nation on it kind of movement. It's a very interesting movement. I've always been fascinated with it, and certainly also fascinated with the idea of creating new sovereign nations. As a matter of fact, I'd like to see that be made possible. Some part of the earth could be inhabited by people that want to colonize it for the purpose of trying new political systems. That would be neat. I don't know how we could get there, but anyway, that was related to his stuff too. But okay, see how that went.